For the majority of the first few decades of video games' prominence in the cultural zeitgeist, superhero games weren't exactly great. As a matter of fact, they were oftentimes considered the laughingstock of the gaming industry. I mean, aside from E.T. Unless you were Spider-Man or Batman, in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s, there was about zero chance that you would ever get any quality video game made about you as a superhero. As a matter of fact, Batman and Spider-Man only really got like 3 good games in this entire time. And so it's not much of a surprise that the golden age of comics' most iconic hero, Superman, didn't get much love in this time period. As a matter of fact, he became the laughingstock of the industry, with the Superman Nintendo 64 game being considered one of the worst games of all time, both on its release and to this day. Although it did inspire the Quidditch minigame from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and now you mention it, the flying minigame from Pokepark Pikachu's Adventures, so honestly, absolutely iconic game. Most important game we've ever seen, top class. God, the Harry Potter spin-off games were so good. But let's get back to the point. In reality, Superman 64 was a cash grab of a game that was littered with clunky, unresponsive controls along with an incomprehensible story, and the game continues to crack lists of the least playable games of all time. It also really didn't help that Superman as a character was far past his peak 1970s popularity, with the 90s comic books leaving the character of Superman facing a down period during the 2000s in the public eye. Basically, the future of the Superman IP wasn't looking too good. I mean, it without a doubt would have been saved if Nick Cage's Kurt Cobain looking Superman adaptation could have just gotten off the ground. Like, if Tim Burton was just allowed to make that film, Superman would be, to this day, the most iconic character in the entirety of cinema. I mean, look at him. He's so beautiful. Why couldn't they just make that film? Guys, let Tim Burton make things. But no, in the early 2000s, we instead got Superman Returns, and the reputation of the Blue Boy Scout was truly at the bottom of the trash can. Trash can? I'm fucking Scottish. The Superman IP was looking bleak. That is until 2005, when independent game studio Factor 5, with financial support from Brash Entertainment, began work on what up to that point had been a failed IP. Factor 5's mission? To make a narrative, character-focused Superman game that focused on Clark Kent. Their publisher, Brash Entertainment's vision? To create a high-action Superman game that flew off the shelves. The game, at this time codenamed Blue Steel, was set to be completed by late 2008, around the same time Batman Arkham Asylum released, meaning this perspective of the publisher is an interesting one in hindsight. Arkham Asylum, of course, is a decently small-scale game that doesn't necessarily prioritize the bombastic action-adventure elements you'd expect from a superhero game. I mean, you spend half the game chasing whiskey molecules and reliving childhood trauma, and thanks to exactly that, it became the most successful superhero game of all time. Okay, maybe there was more to it than that, but the small scale definitely helped. Perhaps if Branch had allowed Factor 5 to focus on a smaller scale Superman story, the same could have happened, but alas, the small development team was sent a clear message and began brainstorming ways to make their game stand out, and with a hand from the many Superman TV shows of the time, they seemed to figure it out. Blue Steel was to bring to life an adaptation of Superman that encapsulated the massive scale of the Super Brawls of the animated series, with help from a sprawling world that was almost entirely destructible, an environment that would be impacted by every single move the player made, to truly create that power fantasy of the Man of Steel. On top of that, the player would need complete freedom of movement within this massive environment, and as Factor 5 made their way through production, it seemed that they had made incredible progress onto what at that point had never really been done before. The team would look into creating a combat system that was reminiscent of brawlers, with a skill curve that would make investing time in the game pay off, despite being accessible enough to be enjoyable to anyone who sat down to play it. Another aspect of the development that feels reminiscent of Batman Arkham. However, instead of focusing on countless combat encounters with waves of normal human enemies, or in the worst case scenario, robots, Blue Steel would highlight its combat in huge layered boss fights that truly test the skills and abilities of the player. In fact, the boss fights would make up the vast majority of the game's runtime. The biggest difference between Blue Steel and its Cape Crusader counterpart though, would be that Factor 5's project would be entirely linear, seeing 3 chapters of open yet structured missions take the Blue Boy Scout from Metropolis to Smallville to Apocalypse, as he would take on the likes of Steppenwolf, Doomsday, Brainiac, Bizarro, Solomon Grundy, Lex Luthor, and even Darkseid. Over 3 distinct chapters, the game would bring episodic stories that built on each other, a structure that would have been reminiscent of not only the many Superman TV shows that inspired the developers, but also of the structure of comic book story arcs, with distinct arcs being told over the span of 6 or 7 individual comic stories. As you can probably tell, these lofty and ambitious ideas led to a development cycle that lasted longer than expected, and so pre-production of the game only came to an end in the summer of 2008. Unfortunately for Factor 5 though, this was maybe the worst possible time for an independent developer to go into production, as only a few months later, the 2008 financial crash decimated the game's progress, as the funding Brash had froze, leading Factor 5's payroll to not be covered, and as Brash Entertainment went out of business, Factor 5 would temporarily close its doors, leaving all work on Blue Steel to do nothing but collect dust. Gone were any hopes of another Superman game, as following the release of Arkham Asylum, the superhero genre became dominated by Rocksteady for years, and after the polarizing releases of Man of Steel and BVS, the entire Superman IP became tarnished by the all too common claim that Superman's a boring character. But as someone that for 2 decades has absolutely adored the Man of Steel, I still have hope. Yes, we may not have seen Superman be fully realised in a game yet, but before Rocksteady showed up in 2008, that was the same for Batman. Before the Spider-Man tie-in games of the early 2000s, that was the case for all superhero games. I truly believe that Superman is still entirely relevant, perhaps more than he has ever been. The morals and values he stands for, the questions he raises, and the hope he inspires. Superman stands as perhaps the last incorruptible character we have left, a role model that, whilst unrealistic, is still vitally important for kids and adults alike to look up to. I think it's only a matter of time until we see a truly great Superman game, and I hope that when we do, it's that character-focused, small-scale story that Factor 5 originally wanted to create. That Smallville and Superman and Lois continue to bring us, and when it finally comes, I'll be more than ready to see one of my favourite characters shine again. With that being said though, I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to hear what you guys think about this idea. What would you want to see from a Superman game? Do you think we'll ever see a Superman game? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, and if you're new here and want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on so you don't miss any more videos like it. With that all being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I will see you in the next one. Dun 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 dun. Boom boom boom. Boom 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 boom. Boom ba-dum. Bye.